Welcome to the Poor Misrepresentation, or the necessity of looking beyond the U.S. official poverty measure. It's a presentation of an analysis by Noel Rutland and Kiki Spezia, two Washington and Lee first-year students. Most of us are used to hearing things about poverty and poor people. We even have a measurement that supposedly tells us the number of poor people living in the United States every year. But what do all these things really mean? First, we should clearly define what poverty is before trying to even address the issue. Depending on who you ask to define poverty, you'll probably be surprised by the various answers you'll get. Some believe that poverty is inherently linked to income, while others believe that poverty refers to a much broader concept. We want to define poverty as a lack of financial means needed to secure core capabilities for minimal well-being. You may be wondering why capabilities matter. Well, the answer is simple: because annual income doesn't tell us enough. When we ask about poverty, we want to know about people's real situations, their everyday well-being. Before we go any further, let's clarify exactly what capabilities are. In the book Creating Capabilities, Martha Nussbaum defines capabilities as not just abilities residing inside a person, but also the freedoms or opportunities created by a combination of personal abilities in the political, social, and economic environment. Being able to obtain core capabilities means having the opportunity to live your life in a way that meets the standards of basic human dignity. So, income might play a role in determining if one is poor. However, what if one makes $5 trillion a year, yet everyone else around them makes 20 trillion? Well, that person by extension can't even afford a loaf of bread. So, income in itself means little without the capabilities to fulfill basic needs with that income. The other part of our definition of poverty relied on financial means. Why do those matter? It may seem self-evident to some, but money is required for people to access some of their capabilities. As we mentioned, combined capabilities are comprised of one's internal abilities and external circumstances. Financial means make the difference between whether internal abilities will atrophy or flourish. They can also largely determine one's environmental circumstances. As a tangible example, envision a person who has serious medical conditions. One of the core capabilities people should have for a basically dignified life is health. If they don't have good health naturally, that means they need the financial means to secure it. People who have high medical needs aren't by default poor, but it's when these needs aren't able to be met that we use the word poor as a label. Now that we've thoroughly defined what poverty is, let's examine how we could possibly measure it. Right now, the government uses the official poverty measure, also known as the OPM. However, there is much excitement over the relatively recently proposed and increasingly supported supplemental poverty measure, also known as the SPM. The official poverty measure is an absolute measurement that was developed in the 1960s by Molly Orshansky. It is calculated on the basis of resources and a threshold. However, the resources are solely based on a family's gross annual pre-tax income. The threshold is 3 times what would be considered a thrifty food basket, a diet that is nutritious, albeit monotonous. This stemmed from the 1950s, when Americans spent about 1/3 of their earnings on food. It is adjusted only for inflation and family makeup. We believe the OPM is necessary, but it should not be our only measure of poverty. The OPM still retains some value despite the frequent criticisms it receives. Foremost, it is a number that offers consistent longitudinal analysis. Because this measure has been used for so long, we can compare poverty rates easily over time. Also, the OPM is a simple determining factor for benefits from many U.S. poverty policies. However, the OPM comes with some problems. Let's start on the resources side. Gross annual pre-tax income is the only thing considered. In-kind benefits, like Medicaid and EBT cards, as well as near-cash benefits, like the Earned Income Tax Credit, are ignored. The non-discretionary expenses of people's daily lives, like commuting to work, childcare, and medical costs, are also overlooked. Lastly, the OPM does not take assets, savings, or debt into account. Now, let's look at the threshold side. The OPM just doesn't factor in standard of living. It ignores geographic differences, though the cost of living in New York City might be significantly higher than those in suburbia, and utilizes an outdated formula. Today, we spend about 1/6 of our earned income on food expenses. However, we're still using the thrifty food basket times 3 approach. We also no longer live in households of only family. Realistically, more people are cohabiting and less are married to each other. The OPM only looks at family makeup, meaning people related by blood or marriage. But what about those who are living together, whose resources are pooled in order to help the household survive? The OPM is only concerned with income and thrifty food basket costs, so it also doesn't capture the depth or proximity of poverty. So, the SPM should also be used to assess poverty. The supplemental poverty measure is a quasi-relative measure that is more complexly calculated than the OPM. Resources include gross annual pre-tax income, but with in-kind and near-cash benefits added and non-discretionary expenses subtracted. As described in Rebecca Blank's article, The Supplemental Measure, this poverty measurement is based on a threshold of 33% of spending on food, shelter, clothing, and utilities, multiplied by 1.2 to allow for some other spending. Like the OPM, the SPM is adjusted for inflation. However, the SPM expands the definition of family makeup into household composition by also including any cohabiting partners and their relatives. Additionally, the SPM factors in geographical differences. The benefits of the SPM may seem intuitive, but it is important to note that they significantly outweigh the risks of adopting the SPM. The SPM lacks longitudinal advantages since the OPM has been calculated exclusively, and as it is so complex, the SPM will not produce a simple value that can be easily used to determine one's eligibility for governmental benefits. It also continues to assume, like the OPM, that resources are shared equally within households, which may neglect the cases of women and children who have no access to their household's income. With all of this considered, the benefits are still more pressing because the SPM is a new measure, and as Blank stated, new measures provide new information. Over time, this can affect people's perspectives on poverty. No single measurement can accurately and completely depict the poverty problem in America, but who said there could only be one system of measurement? Instead, we advocate for combining the OPM and SPM in order to adequately and more effectively measure whether or not people have the financial means needed to access their core capabilities. Neither the OPM nor the SPM should stand on its own. Because the OPM is income-based, it provides a glimpse of the financial well-being of households. It is easy to calculate. The SPM to a degree measures people's functionings, meaning whether or not they are actually fulfilling their needs for food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. Earlier, we defined poverty as a lack of financial means needed to secure core capabilities for minimal well-being. So, you may be wondering why we don't support a purely capabilities-based measurement. Simply, it is because there is no real practical way to measure them, because as Sen wrote in The Quality of Life, the conversion of income into basic capabilities may vary greatly between individuals. Instead, we can assess capabilities by looking at functionings. Though Nussbaum argues in Creating Capabilities that we are familiar with other more qualitative styles of measurement, Poverty for most is tied to income. Certain substantial freedoms are needed for well-being, but the denial of some can be more closely related to experiencing social injustices than being in poverty. A prime example of this hypothetical situation is the Bill Gates example highlighted by Professor Howard Pickett in class. One of Martha Nussbaum's designated core capabilities is emotion. If Bill Gates the billionaire is gay, and part of his emotional satisfaction is tied to marrying a man, yet he is denied that right, is he poor? Most people would say no. Therefore, a capabilities-based measurement that is still tied to income better reflects the general American perception of what poverty is. In conclusion, the best way to define poverty in the US today is a lack of financial means to obtain core capabilities, and by extension, a better way to measure poverty is by combining the OPM and the SPM. For more information, please refer to our works cited and referenced. Feel free to comment below, as our intentions are to initiate more conversations about poverty, not to dictate the sole solutions.